Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Informa Markets in India, I would like to welcome you all for the second webinar on India Pharma eConnect platform. For today's webinar, we are happy to partner with Basel Area Business and Innovation, which is the government arm of the Canton of Basel, Switzerland. The main objective of this webinar is to unravel strategies to expand your business in the Canton of Basel, Switzerland, and understanding their favorable infrastructure ecosystem. This will be a 60-minute webinar, and I would encourage all the attendees. And now we have already crossed around 100 attendees. So I would encourage all the attendees to send us your questions via the Q&A tab, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. Our speakers will try to answer the questions towards the end of the session. Now, without any further delay, let me introduce you all to the moderator of today's session, Ms. Krishna Bhatia, Chief Representative, India for Basel Area Business and Innovation. Ms. Krishna is an entrepreneur and an accomplished industry expert with diversified international experience in new business development, startup, and strategy consulting, especially market entry strategies for Indian and European markets. She is also specialized in supporting European SMEs gain access in India and helping Indian companies invest in the West. I would now leave you in the very able hands of Krishna. Welcome, Krishna, and over to you.
Thank you, Ketki, and thank you, Pharma Market, for having this session. Good evening, everyone. I'm sure you all would be as excited as I am to have our panel today and really discuss the need of the hour. As global industries grow and develop, the need to innovate and evolve persists in this changing economic conditions. Global conditions, global companies are also looking at high-value markets like Switzerland as an innovation hub, basically to develop new products and also leverage the Swiss-made quality label. To talk more about this, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed panelists, Dr. Ravi Sodha and Ms. Anka Hall-Nagel. Ravi is a pharma veteran with 37 years of experience in Novartis and Actelion, and now he runs a pharma consulting firm in Basel, basically to help global biotech startups raise funds, assist companies in and out licensing assets, and product acquisition. He has lived in Switzerland for almost 40 years, with the last 37 in Basel. Welcome, Ravi. Our other panelist, Anka, is the Director Asia for Basel Area Business and Innovation. She has a lot of experience in the pharma sector and was the head of marketing and sales at Dutch Kruither Limited, a Swiss pharmaceutical company. She also worked as a senior brand manager for Colgate Palmolive Limited and as a consultant for Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, Anka. Before moving on to the discussion, I'll give you a brief outline of the construct of the discussion. Firstly, our panelists will tell us about the strong life science cluster of Basel region and how it fares amongst the other European markets, and what's the opportunity in store for an Indian company looking to business in the Basel region. Then we'll be touching upon a few more aspects of interest to our viewers, such as the research talent available in Basel, the infrastructure and soft landing facilities for companies, our startup accelerator and funding programs available, and then highlight the most interesting aspect, which is the tax structure and the cost of setting up a company. Then at the end, we'll have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions, which you can post in the Q&A tab. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we won't be able to answer all the questions, but I have a team curating some of the most common questions asked, so we'll be able to provide a few of those as well. Then we'll have a few moments to wrap the event, where we'll post the survey. The goal of the survey is to understand where the different people in the audience are on some of these issues, get some feedback from you on what you like or dislike so that we can continue to provide relevant information for you. Now, before we start with the discussion, let me give you a very brief idea of my organization, Basel Area Business and Innovation. So we are an economic promotion body and we are supported by the Swiss government. Our work falls very broadly under two broad areas. Which is expansion project, which would be giving them market intelligence and information about the business opportunity available, and then helping them in the real estate search and find an office, facilitate contacts to the right experts like a government authorities, industry, and legal experts. And then once they are settled in, we help them in network building and business development. So as you can see from this slide, we provide end-to-end services, right from providing information about the market to helping them grow the business once they are settled in. And also in the next slide, as you can see, we have supported over 120 plus companies and have had over 2,500 client consultations so far. And the best part is, since we are a non-government body, we don't charge consultation fees, and also we are supported by the Swiss government. So very broadly, this is the work that we do. And now before I hand over to Ravi, you'll be seeing two poll questions on your screen. Please share your responses to them. Okay, so we have got a very interesting response, and as we can see, the responses are changing. But I guess it's skewed towards business development right now. And okay, so the responses are coming in. We'll wait for a few more seconds. Okay, so we have got our responses here. All right, so we have seen that 65%, 64% is for business development. Okay, so that means we have got the right audience here, because our webinar is also on how to expand your business. So it's interesting to see this profile of the audience. And now moving on to the next poll question, please go ahead and share your responses. Okay, so our poll response is here. Now it's saying that 38%, 39% have heard about Basel, but they have never been to Switzerland. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, I'm sure with this presentation, even if you have any more questions about Basel, you'll be more clear on it. And you can always contact us. We have got our coordinates at the end of the slide, and also you can put in your questions during the Q&A round. Great. Thank you for sharing your responses. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you, Krishna, and thank you, Ketki, for the introduction. I noticed that 65% of the audience is in business development, which makes me happy because that's my forte, business development. And I see from the second question, only 18% people have ever heard of Basel, and I'm glad in many ways because I'm here to change your view. So let me talk about Europe's prime life science location. Okay, next slide. So if you look at this slide, of course, whether we like it or not, USA is still the prime location for drug discovery, for our research, for development, sales and marketing. And as you see, it accounts for nearly 2/3 of the business. Europe is not that far behind. If you look at Europe, it's about 1/5. And that's just the top 5 countries. That includes Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and United Kingdom. So there is still a lot of business to be made in this area, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more details. Next slide. So let me talk about Basel. If you look at Basel, the pharmaceutical industry developed in Basel close to 200 years ago. It is not something new. And the reason it developed 200 years ago is primarily because the river Rhine flows through Basel. And as you know, you need a river for transportation, especially 200 years ago. And as you follow Rhine from Basel, as it goes through Germany to Holland, and then finally it flows into the North Sea, you will see pockets of pharmaceutical industry along the way. But why did Basel improve? Why does Basel stand out so much? And Basel, by the way, is a city of 175,000 people. So in Indian terms, it is 175,000. And if you are from Mumbai, it is smaller than Andheri, east or west, take your pick. It's a very small city. If you look at Greater Basel, I can add a little bit more. I can add another 250,000 people. If I add the three cantons of Basel, and of course, it is on the center of Germany and France. And this is what makes Basel so important, because Basel, if you look at the German border, is literally 3 kilometers away, and the French border is 3 kilometers away. And so it is, if you're looking at Europe, then Basel becomes a gateway to rest of Europe. And you are talking of, I don't know how many thousands of people, but you are talking of several million in terms of population in the Basel area, as well as a market of 600-700 million beyond Basel. So it allows you easy access to the rest of Europe. If I look at the next slide, and this is again self-explanatory, because you can see that Basel has a great connectivity, and it's not just the great connectivity. If you look at the distances from Basel to Munich or to London or to Vienna or to Milan, where a lot of pharma industry is based as well, you see that everything is about 1 hour flight away. Paris, for example, you can take a TGV, takes just over 3 hours to get there. So the connectivity, so it's not simply a city that is in the middle of nowhere. It is a city where the connections to rest of Europe is excellent. And of course, the connectivity within Switzerland is also very good. It's a small country. And so those are the two important aspects of being in Switzerland, but being in Basel. So I want to spend a little bit more time on this slide. If you look at this slide, Basel is a true life-size giant in Europe. Now, if you look at the circle where there are several companies mentioned, amongst them Novartis, Roche, for example, and other companies, these are companies which are headquartered in Basel, and they have their research, their development, their sales and marketing and business development, of course, all based here. And just a few days ago, it was announced that Hoffmann La Roche is the biggest pharma company in the world, and it's based in Basel. So, it is a great place to be, because you are connected with so many world-class institutes, and of course, world-class R&D bases. And I'll elaborate on this a little bit more on subsequent slides. And of course, Anke will also tell you a little bit more about what facilities are available for companies domiciling in Basel. Let me go to the next slide. So, of course, it is a strong research center. It's a strong research base. If you look at Basel, if you look at the Premier Research Institute, most of them are based actually in Basel. And if you look at here, there is a Swiss Tropical Institute. And not many people realize this, and that it is one of the premier institute for tropical disease, such as malaria and dengue fever. And this is in Basel. And the other advantage in Basel, people often talk to me about Boston or San Diego, etc. And what I'm saying is that, if you look at, if someone is working in San Diego in a tropical institute and has to go to another institute in the city, it's probably 50, 60 kilometers or miles away. In Basel, for someone to travel from the tropical institute to another institute is less than 2 or 3 kilometers. People usually take a bicycle. It's safe to bicycle here. So it's it's not the nearness of the city to rest of Europe. It's not the gateway to Europe, but it itself is a very self-contained city, and you have all these very interesting technology. And remember that if you look at the history of research, this kind of talent, for example, remember that I'm sure most of you will know that Novartis 25 years ago was composed of Sandoz and Ciba-Geigy. And many people don't know that Ciba-Geigy was composed of Ciba, which was Ciba Chemical Industry of Basel, and Geigy. Geigy, in fact, was a private institute researching in tropical disease. And in fact, Ciba-Geigy had their first research center in India, established in 1929, a long time ago, before most of us were born. Certainly, I wasn't born then. So it has a history of drug discovery and research. It's not something that has evolved in the last 20 years. It has sublimed into a great place for R&D. Okay, let me go to so this slide, in fact, in many ways, this slide is self-explanatory. Simply because if you have drug discovery, if you have sales and marketing, if you have research, if you have strategy, then of course you have a place to do clinical trials. It's a great place. If you are an Indian CRO, for example, you should be looking at domiciling an office in Basel, which will make not only life easy for your existing clients, but if you want to increase your business, this is where you should be. And as I said, my colleague Anke Holnagel will then explain what are the benefits of domiciling in Basel. Okay, let me go to the next one here. Again, I'm not going to go into much details on this slide, but there are more service providers to support your growth. It's consulting services, regulatory affairs, preclinical research, manufacturing, qualification, validation, laboratory analysis, R&D services, a clean room facility. Of course, as you can imagine, that when you have the world-class R&D companies, sales and marketing companies, of course, it is going to have a ripple effect in having other industry growing around it. It's like, if you look at Detroit in the US for car industry 100 years ago or 75 years ago, it not only had the cars manufactured by Ford or General Motors, but it had smaller affiliate companies around which supported the growth of the industry. And this is what's happening in Basel. And remember, it's still a small town. I'll go to the next one. This again, if you look at, this is clearly easy to understand that it's the most innovative area in Europe. If you just have to look at the number of patents that grow, that come out of the Basel region. And of course, this is because we have, and remember that Basel is not all about Novartis and Hoffmann La Roche or other, there are many mid-sized companies, and I'll come to that in a minute, and other areas where Basel is really going to grow. Let me go to the next one. And you can imagine that in a place like Basel, with the region of digital evolution in life science is self-explanatory. Again, it grows because there are so many other companies mushrooming around it that naturally there are other growth coming out of Basel. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that if you look at the world growth, the pharma growth globally, the sales of all pharma companies is currently about 1 trillion. So, the sales and marketing of every pharma company in the world. And surprisingly, 11% or 110 billion actually comes from this small city of Basel. This is phenomenal. And if you look at other industries, for example, The car industry 75 years ago in Detroit could never come up to anywhere near it. It is a phenomenal place that that captures imagination for such a small city. And of course, it's the ripple effect of the small city. So you have a small city, then you have Greater Basel and the three cantons of Basel City, Basel Land, and Jura. And then as well as you go across into Germany and into France, and it opens up, it's like you're opening up a whole new world besides Basel. But Basel is the hub. This is where the action takes place. And as I said, in this region, you have all this digital evaluation in the companies in the Basel area. Let me move to the next one. So this is my favorite topic. Why is Basel? Basel? It's a unique city. It is unique city primarily because it is at the center of Germany and France. So it has a cultural influence from the German influence and the French influence that kind of amalgamates into a new kind of influence. It's an extremely tolerant city. It's not a city that will not like people coming from outside. And I always give one very good example in this context, that Basel has 3 or 4 public libraries which are supported by the public. And as I mentioned, Anke will tell you that our taxes are lower than most other regions in Europe as well as in Switzerland. So in Basel, you can get for your children books in Hindi, in Tamil, in Punjabi, and in Gujarati. Now, you may say, what's so new? You can do that in London or in New Jersey or anywhere else, but you cannot do in Basel. And this is so much unique about Switzerland. And by the way, there are other languages as well. There's Turkish as well. I'm not pointing too much on the Indian languages, but no other city in Europe will do this. It's a unique reason for Basler to say, we welcome you and we want you to be here. And that is a very important aspect. And of course, tax-wise, it's not as high as other cantons, for example. I want to move to the next slide. This again is a good slide, and frankly, the first one says, is it popular with expats? If you look at the first row, if you look at the second row and the third row, so I always say that the third row is no longer an expat. That people who are in the third row are already part of Basel. We call them Baselers. So I would not call them expats. But people always think, it must be Novartis and Roche. Basel is not only about Novartis and Roche. It's all about drug discovery. It's all about clinical development. It's all about marketing, all about business development, strategy, CRO business. That all brings in together into a big hub called Basel. And the reason is, if you look at here we talk about expats, but if you look at Novartis or Roche or Actelion or Abbott, which is down the road from Actelion, or Roivant, 20% of employees actually come from France or Germany. So it's not simply Basel is not simply a city on its own which is completely hidden and protected. It's an open city where other communities do come every day. They come every day to work and go home. Because remember, it's only 3 kilometers away. So a lot of people actually live in Germany or France and come to Basel to work. And there is a Rhine Valley as well, where there's a lot of work going on there as well. But in terms of expats, people do come, they stay for 2-3 years and go away. I came, what I thought was 2-3 years, and I'm here since 37 years. And I enjoy living here. I think it's a great place. But sometimes people do come for 2-3 years and they go back. And so the life in the expat life in Basel is very good. Of course, if you look at Basel in terms of how beautiful it is, it's culturally unique in the sense that you have in the Basel area, there is a greater Basel and a smaller Basel we call Gross Basel and Klein Basel, and there is a river flowing through it. And you can swim in the river during summer. There are special days when you could swim, and there are guards so that you don't get swept away and find yourself in Germany somewhere in the North Sea. This is done, and it's a great place to live. It's a great place. I have to be very honest. It's a great place to raise children as well. And many company employees, when they expat, of course, there are private English schools in Basel, but there are people sometimes decide to send their kids to the local school, which are predominantly German here. But there are now schools that will teach German as well as English. But it's predominantly a German-speaking area. And if you send your children to the English school, I can tell you that the quality of those schools is very good. And I judge quality of a school by where children go once they finish high school. And I know that many of my friends have children who are enrolled at Oxford or Cambridge or Duke University in the US. So that also signifies the quality of the schools that we have in the region. Have I missed anything? I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So in terms of talent, I'm going to talk very briefly about talent, and you can see where the talent comes from. The talent, actually, if you look at Europe, then of course Switzerland traditionally has and I'm talking about pharma, by the way. I'm not going to talk about watch industry, which is more on the Geneva side, or the insurance or the banking industry, which is more on the Zurich side. I'm talking about pharma. And here you're talking of access to 30 or 40,000 people. And the talent actually comes from the number of companies that are domiciled here. So if you come and domicile here, you are one in the middle of so many companies. And I think there was in one of the previous slide, maybe I forgot to mention that there are currently 350 clinical trials, drugs in development in the Basel area. Any one of you, there are now, 170 people dialing in. I want anyone to tell me if they know any other city in the world where they have more than 350 clinical trial drugs in development. No one can match what Basel has. And of course, clinical development means there are talented people. There are CROs who support that. As I said, there are supportive industry. It's like you have General Motors and Ford in Detroit, but then you have all the support industry. And I never want to talk about Basel only in terms of Novartis or Roche. If you look at Basel in that other slide that I showed, you have more than 300 companies here. And Anke will tell you a little bit how these companies are formed. There are financial possibilities to raise money to do drug discovery here. And you're talking of world-class leaders in both in terms of universities and institutions which offer you world-class technologies. So the talent pool is obviously here. It's an obvious thing. You don't need to look for talent anywhere else. I think this may well be my last slide. So if you look at this slide, it kind of encompasses everything together, meaning that you have 3 million people working together, but you have access to 600 million people. If you are in Basel, you open the door and you see Germany and France. In fact, the local public transport in Basel goes to Germany as well as to France. So it's not like you have to have a visa. It's easy to understand if you live in Basel that you have someone who comes every day from Germany or France to come and work in your lab. And this is how the pool of people, you have 3 million working people around here. You have the influence of Germany and France with the Swiss influence, and no other city does this globally. I've been to Boston, and I've been to San Diego, and I've been to the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Basel is unique, and I'm surprised that 18% of you have not heard of Basel, which is which is unique in the sense that it's a hidden gem. You have to come here to Basel and see what Basel has to offer. I think this is my last slide. I will hand over to Anke, I believe. And thank you very much. Have a good day. And if you have any questions, I'm sure there'll be a Q&A. If you have any more questions, then I think somewhere Krishna should have my email, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi, for your passionate presentation on Basel area. It was very inspiring. And hello to everybody from Switzerland. Basel area provides also great infrastructure for life science companies. There is a broad range of commercial office space and lab space available. There are business centers like Regis or Spaces where you can rent desks and in shared or in private office just as you need them. And there are also opportunities to purchase greenfield or brownfield in Basel area. Next slide, please. A very interesting format to support younger or very dynamic enterprises is the Switzerland Innovation Park. It's a national foundation in order to support innovation and entrepreneurship. It's meant to support innovative young companies and facilitate interaction and exchange of experiences. In Basel area, we have 4 sites of the Switzerland Innovation Park covering the different aspects of life science. At the main site in Altschwil, we focus on biotech and medtech companies, whereas the 2 Basel Stadt sites focus on digital health. The site in Jura is about 35 kilometers out of Basel-Stadt and focuses on medtech and health tech, as there is a strong medtech and precision technology industry. In fact, there is a lot of watchmaking industry there as well. Next slide, please. The Switzerland Innovation Park in Basel area offers plug-and-play shared labs fully equipped with standard lab equipment and chemicals, and there's even a technician on site full-time in order to support the startups and the researchers. Next to that, there's also a shared office space available, which is especially suitable for companies that grow quickly or are cost conscious, as young companies always are. Of course, you can also rent private labs and private offices as needed. And the offered, as the companies grow, etc. The offered infrastructure varies from site to site. There's always a community manager available to help the tenants to get quickly operational and feel comfortable, and to facilitate interaction and best practice sharing among the other companies in the innovation park. Next slide, please. The latest addition to our parks is the site at Novartis campus. Switzerland Innovation Park was the very first tenant at the Novartis campus after Novartis decided to open up its campus. The Novartis campus was closed and exclusively used by Novartis for over 20 years. These days, it becomes more and more relevant to orchestrate an innovation network, and so Novartis decided to cooperate with us, Switzerland Innovation Park, to bring exciting companies on campus. The park is dedicated to health tech and provides desks in an open space. The tenants get a badge to the Novartis campus and access to joint events on campus. It's our goal to facilitate the exchange with Novartis employees and our tenants. And so we plan to host several events in the Innovation Park and host joint events together with Novartis at the campus. Next slide, please. In our innovation parks, Basel area runs also accelerator programs to foster entrepreneurship and support innovative startups. Next slide. These programs offer funding, but also workshops and consulting. The first accelerator is Base Launch. It targets very early stage biotech startups and provides convertible loans of up to 500,000 Swiss francs next to consulting and coaching. It's the goal of this accelerator to enable the startups to obtain Series A funding at the end of the accelerator program. And until now, 180 million Swiss francs in funding have been raised by these companies. The second one is I4 Challenge, geared to industrial transformation for local companies. And the third one is Day One, which facilitates startup in healthcare transition and digital health in particular. Next slide. Switzerland is very business friendly. Next slide. As you may know already, Switzerland is one of the most competitive business locations due to its great infrastructure and excellent education system. Another important factor is that the competitive tax system in Switzerland. The corporate tax rate here differs from canton to canton, which is comparable to federal states. And on average, the corporate tax rate in Switzerland is 14.8%. This is significantly lower than in many other European countries like the Netherlands, UK, and also lower than in the US. Also, Switzerland has a double taxation agreement with India, so you don't have to pay taxes twice. And there was the tax reform in 2019, which brought down the corporate tax rate. And the tax system in Switzerland is fully compliant with OECD rules. On the next slide, we see the corporate tax rates in Basel area, and they are even lower than in Switzerland on average. It's only 13%. And in order to attract innovative companies, R&D costs can be deducted as well. A second pathway to reduce taxes is to make use of the so-called IP box, which means that on a cantonal level, profit from patents and similar rights can be deducted and lower the taxes. The maximum relief amounts to 90% of the relevant profit. The relief is based on modified nexus approach and is therefore in line with OECD standards. Together with R&D deduction and the IP box, the effective corporate tax rate can be reduced to 11%. And if you create a lot of jobs and invest huge amounts, then there's the opportunity to obtain tax holidays for up to 10 years. So it's a very competitive tax system to ensure that the companies can thrive here in the area and can focus on innovation. Next slide, please. It's not complicated at all to register a company in Basel area. If you have all required documents, it takes usually 2 to 4 weeks. Only one of the company representatives needs to be a Swiss resident, so not a Swiss national, but somebody with a Swiss address. And often when international companies come here, they choose to assign this role to their law firm in the beginning until they have established themselves and employed the first people. So that's possible. My organization helps you to connect with the right experts and government agencies. And depending on the complexity, the cost for company formation start at 2,000 Swiss francs. On the next slide, I'd like to talk a bit about operational costs. These operational costs are in Basel area lower than in other regions in Switzerland. So if you compare it, the rent for office space with cities like Zurich and Geneva, for example, office rent in Basel area is lower. On the next slide, we want to illustrate the cost of living. And here we chose an example on the apartment rent. And again, you see Basel area has lower cost of living than, for instance, Zurich or Lausanne. On the next slide, I'd like to talk about labor, which is also an important factor in business friendliness. As you have heard before, Basel area has a big pool of highly qualified talent. And due to the high skill level and the relatively long working hours, productivity in Switzerland is very high. The labor law is very employer friendly, and one is able to hire and fire as needed. The unemployment rate is low at the same time. And as we will see later, the Swiss labor market attracts also highly skilled professionals from the EU countries. The contribution to social security by the employer is relatively low, and health insurance is covered completely by the employee, for example. So the costs for the employer, the additional costs are relatively low. On the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about visa regulations. Citizens of the European Union can live and work freely in Switzerland. So Switzerland taps really into the huge talent pool of the EU. And due to the high quality of life, it is actually easy to bring the right specialists to Switzerland. EU citizens that commute into Switzerland, as we heard before, from Germany and France, they receive a so-called G permit. And for non-EU citizens, they have to apply for a residence permit. The Swiss employer applies for this permit, and the applicants usually obtain an L permit first. On the next and last slide from my side, I'd like to share the experience of Dr. Reddy's with you. They moved their European headquarters to Basel in 2016, and their CEO phrased his feedback on Basel area as follows. Basel forms the nucleus of a large life science ecosystem where there is ready access to an excellent talent pool, irrespective of whether you are looking to source highly skilled business developers or specialist clinicians. It's also a great meeting place where industry, government, and academia closely interact. So an excellent location for forging relationships and identifying and initiating new partnerships. And with that, I hand over to Krishna. Thank you.
Information. I'm sure after this, we have got a much good idea of Basel area and the work of Basel area business and innovation. And I'm sure, and we could see that Basel is definitely the preferred destination for companies looking to gain a footprint in Europe. And our organization has been a forefront in helping international companies setting up their business. Now, before we move on to the Q&A round, we have another poll question with us. So I would request you to please choose your responses to it. I think we have a few more seconds. The responses are coming in. Okay, so a majority of our audience, which is 58%, would like to avail for our services. Okay, so that's that's a good number. And just for your information, we have got our contact details on this screen. So if you whatever questions you have, and if whenever you require our services, please feel free to drop either of us an email. Now let's move on to the Q&A session. I have been receiving a lot of interesting questions from the audience that I'll be directing them to our speakers. And so, Anka, this question would be relevant for you. We would want to know a little bit more in detail on the structure that is followed by Indian companies when they come to Basel area, specifically in terms of the support that is provided by you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Krishna. In terms of a type of company, international companies often choose an AG. It really depends on your needs. A limited liability company is possible as well. It's called GmbH in Switzerland. And once a company has made the strategic decision to come to Europe, and Basel in particular, they often get in touch with us, and I encourage you to do so, please, because we help you to obtain the missing informations about the area. And then, as the next step, is actually often to come here on a fact-finding mission and visit Basel area to get an understanding for yourself. And I can assist you with the agenda setting and scheduling. I can reach out to local experts like law firms, set up meetings with tax advisors, accounting firms, etc. And also I can help you to reach out to headhunters and recruiters if needed. And after a company has decided for the company type and has registered itself here in Basel, the next step is often to apply for work permits for Indian employees that are critical to the Swiss enterprise. And as the last step, we gladly offer access to the local ecosystem through events, workshops, webinars, so you can really leverage the know-how that is available and get operational as quickly as possible.
Great. So you're talking about a little bit on the operational cost. So we have a question coming here which talks about the procedure and the cost which is required to register a company and what is the general criteria?
Registering a company costs a minimum 2,000 Swiss francs. You have to contact a lawyer. They help you to set up the various papers. You have to transfer the funding amount to a blocked account to Swiss bank, and the amount, the funding capital varies from 20,000 Swiss francs for a GmbH to 100,000 Swiss francs for an AG. When you have the paperwork ready and the funding capital is in the blocked account, then your lawyer can register the company with the registry in Switzerland, and usually this process takes 2 to 4 weeks, depending on any processes that might be relevant to go through in your home country.
Okay. So if we are having a Swiss resident who's innovation, how could you?
I assume the question went out to the Swiss resident that is needed to register a company. If you have already a local employee on the ground, he can be the managing director for the company, and he can take on this role right from the start. You don't need to take the lawyer as a non-operational director for the company.
Okay. That's great. And there's one interesting question. This would be more relevant to you, Ravi, since you have been in Basel for the longest time, which is 37 years, and having known the in and out of this industry. So in general, what would be your advice for Indian companies that are considered coming to Europe?
I have only one word: come. I think. Okay, I can elaborate, and I know there are other questions as well, so I'm not going to. If you're a drug discovery company in India, it makes sense. I know there is some reluctance for drug discovery efforts to come out of India into Europe. Do it, and you will never look back, because there are some smart drug discoverers in Europe that you should meet, and there are 10,000 of them in Basel. You don't have to go very far. So that's my first why you should come. And if you're a CRO, and you if you have an existing business outside India, this makes a great place to be in Basel, have an office here. You don't have to be physically be here all the time. You just need to be here, have someone look after your office, but it will make your life so easy. If you have never been out of Europe for CRO, then there are many CRO businesses where they would love to have you as a partner. So it's not simply coming out for Indians to be in Basel. It's really there are other people waiting to meet Indian companies, which they don't because India is so far away.
Yeah, exactly. So, in fact, taking on what you said about drug discovery, and if we have CROs who are looking at Europe. So, on these lines, in fact, I received a question from an audience. So, the company, they want to know that how will an Indian company, if they are looking at Basel, how can they take forward pharma research and manufacturing? And you mentioned that there are around 350 drugs in development.
So
Again,
Okay, so if you look at drugs in development, now those are drugs in development already owned by other companies. So I don't know what the Indian company would play a role, but there are within the drug development area, there are obviously many areas where Indian companies, Indian CROs can play a role because drug development is a long process. You start with in vitro work, then you start with in vivo work. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to have a lab here in Basel. It's nice to have a lab, and I know Anke has got many examples of where people have a lab. But even if you don't have a lab, if you have an office here, your work will be streamlined so much. If you are doing in vitro work or in vivo work, or you're doing phase one work.
okay. Yes, of course. I guess that makes a lot of sense for Indian company, especially also since Switzerland is a very high value market. So I guess leveraging the margin and the Swiss made quality would also be of utmost importance for us, right? And now, Anka, I have a question again on the operational issues. So we want to know that how difficult or easy is it for someone to have a work visa, especially since India is not under EU?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, the Swiss enterprise applies for the work permit. So not the employee has to go through this process, but the Swiss enterprise applies for the work permit at the immigration office in the canton in Basel area. The application includes mainly the business case that shows that the business is going well and growing. It explains why the employee from India is critical for the enterprise, for instance, because important know-how needs to be transferred from India. And it also explains that average Swiss wages are paid. Then the immigration office checks the application, and they are very helpful, and they will talk to you. And once the application is complete, it will be sent out for approval to the federal level, and after that, the residence and work permit will be issued for the employee. Often, the work permits are temporary in the beginning, but if there's still need to stay longer to make sure the business is going well, they are extended.
Okay. Yeah, and we got a few more minutes, so we can take a few more questions here. Again, this would be for you, Anka. So, what would be the average wages in Basel? Because Switzerland is considered to be a very expensive market. And in fact, this is also a question that I have been getting commonly from Indian companies. They want to know that they might have to shell out a huge number when they're paying for wages. So, what's your take on this?
Yeah, of course, the wages vary much, very much, depending on the qualification, experience on the job, etc. And please feel free to reach out to us for detailed information. This is available, and we're happy to make that available to you. And it's true, wages are relatively high in Switzerland, but you must not forget that productivity is very high as well, that social contribution for the employer is relatively low. And when you factor all these aspects in, hourly productivity in Switzerland is one of the highest in Europe, actually. And of course, it's important to make up your mind what type of labor you want to bring to Switzerland. It should be high margin bringing labor, focusing on innovation, which then again is also incentivized by our tax system. So all in all, I think the environment is really set out to thrive and grow, all things considered.
Okay. Thank you for this information, Anka. We can take one last question. This one would go to you, Ravi. So there's one company wants to know what is the scope in Basel for generic players, especially since India is a generic market. So I guess this is one of the obvious questions that everyone might be having.
I think we need a separate seminar on this one. but of course, there are generic players in Basel, in the Basel area, but it's not so much. You're not going to set up a generic business. You're going to have your business office in Basel, which is going to make your life so easy for your business in India. So you're not going to. There are many generic players in Germany, for example, where the offices are in Basel, where Anke can help you set up something here, although your business may be in Germany. So it's not that there is no but that's a good question. That what we talk about drug discovery and clinical development, but what about generics? Because India is a big generics player, the biggest, in fact. But so you should separate the two, the generic business which you are running from having an office in Basel, which is going to make your life so easy.
Right.
And if I may add to this, you might recollect that Dr. Reddy's, for instance, set up its European headquarter here in Basel. They handle their dossiers and their marketing authorizations here out of Basel, because the talent pool is available here, and they also develop their biosimilar business out of Basel, again, leveraging the talent pool and great accessibility of Basel area.
Right. And also, Ravi, just coming back to you on this, I recall that even you have a lot of experience in running a pharma company. So could you also elaborate a little bit more on the wages and what is the wage structure and how much does an Indian company have to shell? Because I guess you would be also pretty experienced in this.
Yeah. So my response, and by the way, offline, many companies ask me the same question. So my basic, truthful answer is that you cannot expect Indian wages in Switzerland. It just ain't going to work. Okay, but you look at a whole picture, as Anke was saying. You look at the value that an individual brings in Switzerland. So you look at the total value analysis, not just what wages you're going to pay. It is what is the added value of being here. So don't look at, if you pay X rupees in India, are you going to pay X rupees equivalent Swiss francs in Switzerland? No one is going to join you. And of course, you cannot expect a Swiss salary for someone who is moving to India. But you have to look at the whole package of what that person brings. And if you look at Dr. Reddy's, and Anke, please correct me if I'm wrong, they have over 100 people from India based in Basel now, or at least 70 people. And they are certainly not being paid Indian rupees in Basel. This doesn't work. But if you look at the overall benefit, Dr. Reddy's lab is getting based in Basel is enormous.
Right, right. You're right. So we have to look at the whole value, and the value is that a company gets in Basel is, of course, unmatched. And I'm sure Basel would be a great market, and we are all there to help you out in your uh, whole soft landing and your search for a rental space and whatever you require. Yes. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. We are even had a lot of questions, but unfortunately, we can't answer all of them. But please feel free to drop us an email. And also at the end of this session, we'll be sending you a copy of the presentation, which you could use for your reference. So thank you so much. You'll be getting a survey question. Please do answer that. Thank you again. Stay safe and have a nice evening.